Hello and welcome back to another episode of Injustice For All MMA. My name is David, and this episode is for UFC 290, Volkanovski versus Rodriguez. It's 1 a.m. I sounded a lot more enthusiastic. Maybe like 30 minutes ago, but I'll try to run down this card. Now, I'm going to do something a little different where I'm going to run down the card the way I usually do, which is with the scorecards, but then also if I'm gonna go from prelims upward. If the certain fight doesn't have a robbery, an injustice, an honorable mention, I'll just talk about the fight the best way I can. Um, Obviously, this deep into the night, some fights I might not talk well on some stuff, but you get the gist. Um, this was probably the best card of the year. I know it's pretty soon, and I can't remember the last couple cards in my head at this very moment, but this is probably the best card of the year. Just the fact that there were so many finishes, I had enough. There were so many commercials, and by commercials I mean promos. But I was able to sit down after each finish and just be like, "Oh, this is great," and just relax. But beyond that, let's just get into the card. Best card of the year. Great card, top to bottom. Uh, favorite some favorite fighters didn't win. Some other favorite fighters won, and here we go. So we're gonna start off with the first fight. Kirk versus uh Ribovics. I'm gonna say Ribovics. Kirk versus Ribovics. Ribovics won 29-28. He won the last two rounds. Nothing here. Nothing to talk about nothing to reference the scorecards. There's nothing there that really needs to be talked about, really. This fight was very interesting in the sense that it started off very, very, very quick with Kirk getting a takedown, and he just stayed there pretty much for the entire round. And then once we got into the last two rounds, we saw that Ribovics controlled everything. He was great on the feet. He outstruck Kirk. There was this weird part about Ribovics in his striking. Maybe it was just the fact that he fought Kirk, but when he was fighting him and he was getting the better of Kirk, outstriking him in the last two rounds, dropping him, I believe, in round two and just round two, but outstriking him heavy in round three. There would be lulls in his striking. So when he would get Kirk, when he would have him on the proverbial ropes against the cage, he would kind of just like step back and just kind of jog and bob, and I just found that weird in my head. I was like, why isn't he going for the finish? Why isn't he going for the finish? But he would go for the finish in the sense of he would throw a multi-shot combination and then stop. Multi-shot combination and then stop. And Kirk would hit him a couple times, and then it wouldn't look that effective. It wouldn't look like any of those shots affected him, relatively speaking. And then boom, he would just go back on. It was just a weird fight. Another thing to notice is Chris Tione. I can't. The refs tonight were weird. I'll just say weird. They're just so loud. And they're just loud. You know, in the Apex, I always complain about Chris Tione. It's just, don't grab the cat, don't do, and there's a part of me that every time they do that, it reminds me of, it doesn't remind me, it makes me think of, it doesn't make me think, hold on, I'm trying to think this through. When they're so loud, I understand the point is to tell the fighter, hey, you're doing this incorrectly, right? But you shouldn't be talking so much to where your sentence rolls on past like 5 seconds, because now you're talking and the fighters are like looking up to the ref. They're like they're shifting attention. I'm waiting for the day, because we've seen almost everything in MMA. I'm waiting for the day where a fighter looks over. A good example would be like Dumas, right? Dumas, Dumas versus what was his name? He fought in Jacksonville. Let me see if I can pull this up real quick. I got a little bit of time. It's Dumas versus Brundage, where Dumas was on top of Brundage, okay, and his coaches were speaking to him, and he would look up. And now this happens with a lot of fighters do this. I can't reference any at the top of my head right now. It's the middle of the night, but a lot of fighters would look up and look directly at their coaches. This is like a common, like a low key thing actually, but they would look up at their coaches and look directly at their eyes. And he'd be like, "Hey, do this certain thing," and he'd look up, and then go. And I always thought that's weird, because in a way, yes, he's on top of you, but he's not fully paying attention. And certain refs would do this thing where they would say something, right? Maybe Mark Smith will be like, "Hey, watch your fingers," right? It's a quick, just watch your fingers. And then the fighter, not looking at Mark Smith, would acknowledge that their fingers are out and then close their fingers. That's quick, that's easy, done, right? Close your fingers. Watch the pick up your shots, right? Shit like that. But Chris Taglioni has to add a 3-sentence combination. Close your fingers out of the cage. Put your fingers out of the cage. Get your fingers out of. There's no need to add 3 more. Get your fingers out of the cage. A swipe would suffice. Like he's like a siren. He's just going, and it annoys me. It annoys me. Maybe I'm nitpicking here, but it annoys me. Yeah, I had more to talk about this fight, but it's late in the night, so we'll skip over. Ross versus Aguilar, 17-second KO. 17-second KO. Nuts. Just off the bat. Boom. Ross is out. KO. And if I remember correctly, he's the last Mexican to win on this card. I believe so. He's the last Mexican to win on this card. I really thought it was going to be an interesting night. Next fight. This is the one I wanted to talk about. Saaiman versus Mitchell. Okay, Saaiman wins by TKO. Let me set this up for you. Mitchell, I'm trying to speed this through. I don't want this video to be long, but you'll get the gist. This is the new format. Saaiman versus Mitchell. Before Mitchell fights, they do the little pre-promo thing where where Anik is saying Mitchell has fought 4 times in the last 7 years. And at first I wanted to look it up to be like, okay, maybe he just fought recently, right? 4 times in the last 7 years. Okay. Maybe he just fought, pandemic, right? Like 19, 21, 22, 23. Boom, 4 times. Maybe. But then in my head, I'm like, no, usually when that happens, when a person fights small in a long span of time, they'll lower the space of time to get the reference through. No, 4 times in the last 7 years is... when I heard that immediately, I didn't even look at the odds. I mean, based off the record, I knew Saaiman was going to win, but in my head, I was just like, 4 times in the last 7 years just stunned me. It caught me. I was like, what the... and there's an online contingency that craps on the UFC for short notice replacements and, why do they... And I get it. It makes the most sense, right? If you had a fight scheduled and it falls through, you have to get someone up. I don't think it's fair to ding the UFC for finding guys last minute. These are the guys available last minute. They can't just, they can't just have top 15 guys available on speed. Now they can, but those guys are top 15 guys. They're at home probably eating. They can't make weight in that span of time. But that's regardless of the point. When I heard him say for the 15th time, Mitchell fought 4 times in the last 7 years, I instantly knew what was up. And then the fight started really well for Mitchell, actually. I believe, if I can remember correctly, he got a takedown. He was really effective. And then Saaiman was just like, oh, okay, reverse, and then let me just fucking finish you. Crazy that fight even happened, really. Now we're going to go into our first honorable mentions. Okay, first honorable mentions. This is Petrino versus Prachnio. This fight ended in a submission for Petrino in the third round. I gave Prachnio the first round, and then Petrino the second round. I was very stunned because in my head, I hate watching these. Okay, quick tidbit. I'm going to talk about the commentary a little bit, and in particular, DC. DC cannot score cards to save his life, and then Anik wants to egg him on for some reason. Anik, the fucking goofball, who everyone loves. Anik, I like Anik too, but he's a fucking goober in a good way. Shout out John Anik. No, he's being a goober by egging on DC. Even tonight, he was like, DC, I know you're a fan of those. Scorecards. He's egging him. He knows in the back of his head. DC just waffles on about scorecards that we'll get to later tonight, where he just says like, "Oh, I thought this round was close," when that round wasn't close. But whatever. They were talking about how, and DC does this a lot, where when someone gets a takedown, now the scoring criteria just suddenly changed. When effective striking is over effective grappling, but in DC's mind, grappling and and control time now becomes much more important than strikes. It's weird how that suddenly changes when DC's on the mic, but whatever. We go to the first round. In the first round, Prachnio outstrikes Petrino on the feet, and he's outstriking him on the feet. Then there is the rest of the fight, which most of it remains on the cage, on the fence, where Prachnio is outstriking Petrino mostly with knees in the clinch. He's the only active one in this round, but because Prachnio landed a couple heavy strikes, I'm assuming all three judges gave it to Petrino, but if you watch this fight carefully, this is reminiscent of like Grisham's last fight. Prachnio won this round. He outstruck Petrino clear in the clinch, on the feet, even the strikes that weren't in the clinch. That is his round. And then in the second round, Petrino had a takedown with ground and pound and a submission attempt for basically 4 minutes. Prachnio was active on the bottom. So there you go. That's my scorecard. You go to the judges' scorecards. And all three judges, Mike Bell, Junior Chiro Camacho, and Chris Lee, give the first round to Petrino. I disagree entirely. There's not enough that Petrino did that gives him that round. Honorable mention to all three of those judges. I disagree with that scorecard. So there you have it on that. Just to put a bow on this fight real quick, Petrino and Prachnio. Petrino reminds me, and they mentioned the name because as I saw him fighting, one name pulled up in my head, and that is the almighty Jailton Almeida. Jailton Almeida. If you listen to the other videos I made, annoying. I hate him. He's annoying. He's basically this new hybrid of fighters that are coming out. Him, Muhammad Makayev, other grapplers. Bakayo Bora, whatever the fuck is it? Bakayo. I don't know his name. These guys who aren't good at striking, who are not good at striking. Forget what you heard, okay? Muhammad Makayev dropped Durden, whatever, right? They all have that. There's always the hyper grapplers who land a couple shits and get that off, okay? But they can't, relatively speaking, they can't strike, and so their first instinct is to wrestle. Now, that's not my problem, nor is that an issue, right? There's many fighters who just instantly want to grab you, right? Taira on this card, right, is a good example of a fighter who can't, if we're just being honest here, he really can't strike, and he just instantly goes into takedowns. But his style is a little more different and a little more appealing and a lot cleaner. But we'll get to that later. Those other guys that I mentioned, they get on top of you and then they just sit on top of you and wait. It took a while. It took a while for Petrino to actually land strikes on Prachnio. It took a bit of some time for him to legitimately start striking. I'm so miffed at there's many fights I see in the Apex where fighters will get the person down and will just start holding and squeezing. And I get that's part of the tactic. And then their coach has to remind them, like, hey, incorporate some strikes here. Incorporate some strikes here. Add some shit. Like that's an important element. Not only to getting scorecards, just getting rounds banked in, but inflicting damage on your opponent. And while Petrino did that later on to Prachnio, it took him 10 fucking years for that to start. And this is going to annoy me. And this is why I'm hoping that we see, and when I say hope, listen, in the span of now to when Jailton Almeida fights Curtis Blades, are we going to see Jailton Almeida have some new level of striking? Definitely not. But I hope so, because this isn't going to cut it. Nor do I think he's going to beat Curtis Blades. But still, let's just say he does. This shit isn't appealing. Forget about what sells and if it's watchable or if it helps scorecards. This stuff isn't even good to, like, it's not even good to watch. It's not watchable. At a certain point, it's not watchable. It's one thing to be like, when people point out Pantoja, right? When people point out Royval, when people point out guys who just swim on the ground, Charles Oliveira, right? Even Makhachev to some point. Like, those guys are somewhat active on the ground. They're somewhat active in one way or another, right? With Oliveira, he's active on the ground because he's throwing stuff from the bottom. Oh, no, because he's searching for submissions, right? He's searching for submissions, right? The cool thing about Tony Ferguson was he was active on the bottom. He's throwing knees. He's throwing elbows, he's throwing hands. He's throwing fists. Right on the bottom. He's not accepting bottom position. Same thing with Royval. He'll do the same shit. But then we come over here to these guys, these specific guys, and they just look like absolute shit. They just get you down and they lay on you. You know, lay and pray is now a thing that needs to come back, because these are the definition of lay and pray. Except the difference now is they're laying and praying on you, and then in the last second of the third round, they'll get a submission, and then they'll go, I'm finishing people. I'm a finisher. It's like, no, yeah, but you suck. Yeah, but I just had to sit through you laying on somebody for damn near 14 minutes before you lulled me to sleep, and then you were like, oh, and then they tapped, and then you get up and scream, and then we clap because, like, oh yeah, you got the finish, that's cool, but like, you just, I was already in my car, I was already driving home. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And we now have to suffer through this, and we have to suffer through stupid promos where it's, oh my God, Jailton Almeida's on the rise. Jailton Almeida's on the rise because he can't get control of his weight. He should be fighting at light heavyweight, but no, he's fucking big, so he'll fight at heavyweight. Oh, it's easier to fight at heavyweight. No, he should get starched at heavyweight. But whatever. Now I'm getting mad. Okay. Next fight. This is also an honorable mention. Let me get this out of the way before I talk about the fight. Crute versus Menifield. I had this 10-9 to Crute in the first round. This fight ends in a submission for Menifield. In that very first round, Crute outstrikes Menifield, mostly with knees in the clinch. I'm sorry. I think I fucked up here somewhere. Hold on. Yeah, I think I fucked up here. Hold on. I fucked up here. Hold on. Okay, back to that Petrino fight. Petrino Petrino had 2 takedowns with no ground and pound, with literally no ground, little to no ground and pound, while Prachnio outstruck Petrino on the feet and was more active in the clinch and on bottom. So take what I said just now and apply that on the Prachnio thing and Petrino card. Okay, now back to the Crute thing. Man, I'm all over the place. Crute outstruck. The point still applies on the Prachnio thing. Crute outstruck Menifield, mostly with knees in the clinch. He definitely outstruck Menifield. Menifield landed a couple good shots, but it wasn't enough to deter the amount of strikes he occurred in the clinch from Crute. Yeah, 10-9 to Jimmy Crute in that very first round. You go to the scorecards, all 3 judges give it to Menifield for it. This one doesn't even make sense. If you thought the first one didn't make sense, this one doesn't make sense. The first one also didn't make sense. Derek Lilly, Chris Lee, and Ron McCarthy. Honorable mention, all 3 there. Now to the fight. Crute. I might have to fix this format. I'm sorry. This video is way too long. Crute Menifield. The first fight was an absolute banger. Menifield should have won. He got pointed. And then this is what we have now. You know what's so interesting about this fight is that not only did Crute retire at the end because he's digressed basically, but the funny thing about Menifield is that I don't know why this hasn't been a bigger story, but he leaves Saif Saud, right? He leaves the Dallas camp basically because, if I can read through the tea leaves, he fought way too technical, and he didn't like that. He didn't like fighting like a robot, and he moves over to Pat Barry, where now he's an absolute, where basically he wants to be a lot more finish heavy, and this is the best thing for his career. And while we all kind of knew this fight was going to be a lot more slowed down, I didn't think Jimmy Crute would come in looking smaller, and it definitely didn't help him. It definitely didn't help him in the slightest. Next fight, Jauregui versus Gomes. Gomes just a TKO. Could this fight have gone longer? I mean, no, it was a good stoppage by Herzog. If this were maybe like a couple years ago, if I don't know, if this were a couple years ago, or if this were last week's main event, we would have had more fight action. Next honorable mention, Taira versus Chairez. I'm going to say Chairez. Taira versus Chairez. I had this 30-27 with a 10-9 in all 3 rounds for Taira. The last round, you can argue that round for Chairez, but it's still a 10-9 for Taira. In that very first round, Taira outstruck Chairez and had some ground and pound. But the weird thing in this round was that Chairez dropped Taira pretty early in the round, but beyond that point, Taira still outstruck him and had some ground and pound as well. In the second round, Taira had a takedown with ground and pound for basically 3+ minutes and a submission attempt. And then in the third round, Taira outstruck Chairez and had a takedown with ground and pound for 3+ minutes. Chairez had a submission attempt at the very end of the round, at the very closing of the round. That is not enough, in my opinion, to give him that round. He's losing the entire round, and then at the very end he has a submission attempt. That's not enough, but I put a close mark on it because maybe someone out there could argue it, because it's in, and it's in for sure. And while it's at the closing of the round, it looks pretty in. And if maybe there's a couple more seconds, you could argue it, blah, 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 blah. But I had it 30-27. I don't give credence to the first round. But I'm sorry, this episode is all over the place. I'm gonna fix this format. I'll probably go back to the old format, but you go to the judges' scorecards, and they totally do the opposite of what I'm saying. So Adelaide Bird, all three judges' scorecards are the same. All three judges' scorecards are the same. Adelaide Bird, Ben Cartledge, and Derek Clearly. So in the first round, they give Taira the first round. So they see what I'm saying, which is basically the drop is irrelevant. Taira dominated the round. Second round, they all give Taira a 10-8. Now, here's my problem, right? With that, I understand why they gave Taira a 10-8. The submission attempt, he's on top of him for basically the entire round with ground and pound. Now, it's not enough ground and pound for me. I've seen much. I remember Tabura versus Romanov, round 1, where Romanov takes him down immediately and stays on him for the entirety of the round, dishing out more ground and pound than Taira gave out, and still got a 10-9. Not feeling this 10-8. I disagree with this 10-8. And then all three judges give Chairez the last round. I don't agree with that either. He's losing the entire round, and then he got a submission attempt, so therefore he wins the round? No, not at all disagree with that. I won't honorable mention them, but still, I disagree with that entirely. Lawler versus Price. I'm going to try and speed through these. Lawler versus Price. Weird KO. Congrats to Lawler. Great career. Weird KO. He hits him, and then Price just kind of slumps. He just slumps down. It looked so weird. It looked so weird that in the back of my head, I was like, "What the? This looks kind of flimsy. This looks kind of phony." But then on the replay, you watch it back, and you're like, "Oh no, okay, this looks pretty clean." Nickal versus Woodburn. Nickal basically TKOs Woodburn. Yeah, I'm tired of this thing, and DC was just all over the place. I swear to God, I'm tired of this thing where we're supposed to pretend to put over these fighters. We're supposed to pretend that certain things don't exist. Okay, it's the same thing with the Usman knockout when he knocked out Masvidal. He knocks out Masvidal and everyone goes, Usman has hands. Usman has hands. And it's like, no. Usman can strike regular. It's not he has hands. It's he got taken down in round 1. Masvidal is anticipating a takedown, and he does basically what every wrestler does, which is, hey, teach me the overhand. Teach me the overhand. Teach me the I'm going to fake a takedown overhand. This is what everyone does. Everyone does this shit. Not to say Bo Nickal does this, but I'm just saying it's a hybrid of this, which is I am a one in a lifetime generational wrestler. The guy who's fighting me, his hands are lower than they normally should be. And that's factual. There's only very few guys, Brandon Moreno, who can keep their hands up and still somehow be fast enough to defend takedowns like that. Most people can't do that. But for some reason, DC doesn't talk about that. DC won't talk about, hey, oh my God, his hands are fucking amazing. No, they won't talk about, his hands are low. His hands are low. You got the knockout. Oh my God, you can get it done with your hands. Yeah. A lot of these guys can get it done with their hands. Duh. The fuck are you talking about? But whatever. There's that. Next honorable mention, Turner versus Hooker. This fight was great as well. This fight ended in a split decision. I had this 29-28 for Hooker. Last 2 rounds to Hooker. First round for Turner. In that very first round, okay, Turner outstruck Hooker. That was pretty simple. And then the second round, Hooker outstruck Turner and had a submission attempt to close the round. And then the third round, Hooker was outstriking Turner as well, dropped him, had some ground and pound. Turner had had a takedown and was pretty active on the bottom, but Hooker was outstriking him well on the feet and had some ground and pound as well, and he dropped him. So, I mean, there's that. You go to the judges' scorecards, and this is where we probably have the worst scorecard of the night. Ron McCarthy has his scorecard reflects mine. Derek Cleary, his scorecard reflects mine. And then Adelaide Bird, I think she just wasn't watching it. She just wasn't watching it. Something happened. They incorrectly put in her scorecard. Every excuse in the book other than this is probably the worst scorecard of the night. She gives the first round to Turner. She gives the second round to Hooker. And then she gives the third round to Turner after he got dropped and outstruck on the feet. I don't know what to say. I don't know. There's nothing else to say, really. Next fight, Whittaker versus Du Plessis. Whittaker by flying armbar. Whittaker by alien invasion. Whittaker. This is what I saw. Since this fight was announced, it was Whittaker by whatever he wants. And I fell into that. I fell into that mode of thinking because I've seen these last few fights where he pieced up Cannonier, where he was on a crazy run, where he should have been crowned champion against Israel Adesanya. But no, he was on an incredible run where he beat Vittori, where he beat Darren Till. I can go on and on. Where he beat Gastelum. Like, these things are, but his run back to a title shot is insane, and he should have gotten the title, but whatever. Beats Vittori, then he fights Du Plessis, and I'm looking and I'm watching and I'm like, Whittaker by whatever he wants. Then the second round starts and I'm like, oh, okay, it's fine, whatever. This will be a 29-20 and we can go home. No, we can't go home. We cannot go home. Basically, by the end of the round, towards the end of the round, Du Plessis is outstriking Whittaker in total. Basically, he outstrikes Whittaker, but on the feet, Whittaker is barely outstriking Du Plessis. On the feet, he's barely outstriking him, and then both of them get a takedown, but it's Du Plessis who gets the last takedown with lots and lots of ground and pound. And that gives him the round. And then in the second round, he gets a TKO finish. Whittaker by what? Dude, I like Whittaker. And what stunned me is I'm just stuck looking at all the comments going, Whittaker by ham sandwich. Whittaker. It's crazy to see what we just saw. And then the worst promo ever. You know what makes this fight even goofier is before this fight even starts, DC is setting this up with a Cody Rhodes reference. Now, I get it. Wrestling is tied to MMA. He did a special referee thing for WWE. Yeah, that's cute. I just thought it was corny, the finishing the story thing, and then it just didn't age well. In fact, it aged perfectly. Cody didn't finish the story. Whittaker didn't finish the story. He shouldn't have said that. He jinxed him. He fucking jinxed him. And then Moreno versus Pantoja. This is the next honorable mention. I mean, I watched it. Then I went online. Okay, because here's the thing. I watched it, and just like everyone, you heard the scorecards, you saw the scorecards, 49-46, 48-47, 48-47, whatever. And upon watching it, after watching it, it's close to it's fair. Either fighter could have won. Now I'll explain. My scorecard is 48-47 Moreno. First round Pantoja. Next 3 rounds, second, third, and fourth Moreno with a close marker on the third round. And then the 5th round goes to Pantoja, 48-47. In the very first round, Pantoja outstrikes and drops Moreno and had some ground and pound. Okay? Then in the second round, Moreno outstrikes Pantoja by a lot on the feet, and had 2 takedowns with some ground and pound. Then in the third round, Moreno, here's where it gets a little, here's where the scorecard gets a little iffy. In the third round, Moreno barely outstrikes Pantoja. Now this is in totality. He's outstriking him on the feet, but barely. And then Pantoja, no. Initially, he's outstriking him well. Pantoja has 2 takedowns. Moreno has 2 reversals. And in the last iteration of the takedown, Pantoja is landing ground and pound. In the last iteration of the reversal, Moreno's landing enough ground and pound. So we're in this situation where they basically land kind of close to even amount of strikes on the ground, and then Moreno outstrikes him barely on the feet. And that's where I put the close marker, because there's so much movement in that round that you could argue the round for either person here. Now, I think Moreno won this round, but you can argue the round for either person in this third round. Quick tidbit: DC by the fifth round, I know I skipped the fourth round, I'll get to that. By the fifth round, you can hear DC saying, the fourth round is very close. He's high. At this point, he's high. This is the fourth round. And this was the online bugaboo about control time and effective striking, basically. This was the same argument people had with Santos versus Valentina. In round 4, Moreno outstrikes Pantoja on the feet. He outstrikes him pretty well, actually. He outstrikes him on the feet. He has a reversal, but I'll get to that in a second. Pantoja has 3 takedowns. This is what's important about this round. Pantoja has 3 takedowns, and in each iteration of the takedown, while yes, he's searching for submissions and doesn't get any, he's searching for submissions, he doesn't land any strikes. He's not landing any strikes. He's just getting takedowns. He got 3 different takedowns. No ground and pound. No strikes. Nothing. Just takedowns. But he's getting outstruck on the feet. So he's getting outstruck on the feet, goes for a takedown, gets it. Right? Moreno gets back up, outstrikes him on the feet, takedown. Outstrikes him on the feet, takedown. So this is a round we score all the time. But nonsense from 2 judges, obviously. We'll get to that in a second. This round right here should have been scored for Moreno. We'll see in a second, but it should have been scored for Moreno. The third round, I can't really argue about. You go to the 5th round, where it's pretty dead even on strikes. It's even on the feet. No, Moreno's up at one point on the feet by a little bit, and then Pantoja gets a takedown. Now, he's down on strikes for a second. He's down on strikes, but he gets a takedown, and then he gets Moreno's back. And when he gets Moreno's back, he lands a couple strikes that basically put them back, say, even. And this is Pantoja's round pretty clearly. You go to the judges' scorecards, and Junichiro Kamijo, I mean, you can't argue. They scored this pretty correctly. They scored correctly. Their scorecard reflects mine, minus the third round. Junichiro Kamijo and Derek Lely both have the exact same scorecard. Their scorecard reflects mine, minus the third round. They give the third round to Pantoja. I can't argue with that. I can't argue. This third round is close. It's the closest round. It's the only round that's arguable. This is the only round that's arguable. People are probably going to talk about, round 4, because DC said round 4 is close, when Moreno outstruck him heavy in this round, and Pantoja did nothing with those takedowns. Nothing but the takedown. And by even more proof, I hate to say this, but all 3 judges give Moreno the third round. Whatever. It's the third round that's the closest one. We go to the 5th round. Honorable mention of Ben Cartlidge. Ben Carlos' scorecard is pretty correct up until the 5th round. His scorecard is correct up until the 5th round. He gets the 5th round wrong. They're pretty even on strikes in the 5th round, and Pantoja has Moreno's back, and he gets a takedown. Come on, that's Pantoja's round. Honorable mention to Ben Cartlidge. Other than that, this fight the first 2 rounds started off amazing, and though while this gets thrown around a lot, I know I'm complaining a lot. That's what this is, but like. Well, this gets thrown around a lot about, oh, this fight is an instant classic or what. John Anik, I swear to God, this fucking spaz. This fight is an instant classic. We'll be talking about it for a long time. We'll be talking about this fight, this card maybe for a long time. After round 2, 3 is great because Moreno goes crazy, right? No. Round 2 is the one where Moreno goes crazy. Yeah, after round 2, 3 is the hectic round, the close round, that's crazy. And then 4 and 5 are okay. Like, this fight's okay. But in terms of, like, Moreno's catalog, this is definitely better than the third Figueiredo fight he had. The third Figueiredo fight was pretty dead. Okay, maybe I take this back. This fight we'll be probably talking about for a long time. I take that back. Apologies to Anik. I'll take that back. That Volkanovski versus Rodriguez. This is the last one. I think I'm going over. This is 40 minutes long. Volkanovski versus Rodriguez. First round, Volkanovski gets 2 takedowns with ground and pound. Second round, Volkanovski gets three takedowns with ground and pound. Rodriguez is slightly active on the bottom, and then the third round, Volkanovski finishes Rodriguez. Boom. That's the end of the fight card. This was a pretty good fight card. I wasn't mad. A lot of finishes. The decisions we got weren't boring, with the exception of none of them. This was a pretty killer fight card. Nothing to complain about other than maybe a few niggles on the scorecards. And Pantoja and Moreno being close, like you really can't argue with the decision here. Now, I know everyone's going to stick on the 49-40 whatever, but there's only one part of that scorecard that's wrong, and that's the 5th round. Other than that, rounds 2 is Moreno, rounds 3 is Moreno. I'm sorry, rounds 2 is Moreno, rounds 4 is Moreno, rounds 3 is a toss-up, so you can't really get bad at Ben. I know Ben Carlos is going to get shat on, but there's only one person who should get shat on, and that's Adelaide Bird, for literally thinking that Jalen Turner won that fight. That's all I got. Thank you all for listening. I will fix this format because this is way too long, and God bless.